High on Everest, survival depends on the rope beneath your gloves. On May 15, 2013, just above the Khumbu icefall at 5,600 meters, Alexei Bolotov's safety line sliced silently against sharp granite, triggering a 300-meter fall and leaving his partner in shock and the climbing world demanding answers. This documentary uncovers 5 fatal Everest accidents where trust in the system meant nothing and asks how many hidden flaws lurk, unseen, in every knot, anchor, and buckle. The most horrible fate isn't always a simple fall. It's discovering too late that safety, at these altitudes, is never guaranteed. Alexei Bolotov was 50 years old when he set out for Everest in the spring of 2013. Born on January 20, 1963, he had built a reputation as one of Russia's most respected alpinists, earning the Piolet d'Or twice for bold new routes on Makalu and Janu. His partner for this climb was Denis Urubko, another elite from the high-altitude world. Their aim was not the crowded standard route, but a new, untried line on the southwest face, an alpine-style ascent between the legendary 1975 Haston Scott and 1980 Chok Kukuchka routes. On May 15, as the sun rose over the Khumbu, Bolotov and Urubko moved above the icefall at 5,600 meters. This was not a routine descent. They had left the security of the fixed lines to avoid the bottlenecks and crowds, trusting instead in their own judgment and a single static rope. In the thin air, with oxygen less than half of sea level, every movement demanded precision. Bolotov's experience told him a carefully chosen anchor and a well-placed rope should be enough. The logic was simple. On a face this steep, speed and efficiency mattered as much as redundancy. But in this environment, even the smallest assumption can be fatal. The rope beneath his gloves was all that separated Bolotov from the void, a lifeline, but only as strong as the rock it touched and the knots he tied. Here, at the edge of what is possible for the human body, risk is measured in centimeters and seconds. Bolotov eased his weight onto the rope, boots scraping at the rim of the gully, the granite edge hidden beneath a dusting of snow. The static line, white and taut, pressed hard against the rock, no padding, no margin for error. Denis Urubko waited above, watching his friend disappear over the lip. There was no warning. A muffled snap echoed up the slope, sharp and final, as fibers parted under his weight. For a split second, the rope fluttered. Then Bolotov was gone, swallowed by the void below. The fall traced a line of nearly 300 meters down broken stone and ice, ending far from where he had started. At this altitude, the impact was absolute. Death came before the mind could register the fall. In the silence that followed, Urubko stared at the severed end, the clean cut where the rope had sheared against the granite. The descent route, so carefully chosen, had become a fatal trap. Bolotov's body was recovered the next day, May 16th, by Sherpas and Urubko himself. It took a helicopter to bring him back to Kathmandu, a rare intervention on Everest's lower slopes. The attempt on the southwest face ended in an instant, leaving behind a partner haunted by the knowledge that a few centimeters of nylon, pressed against an unseen edge, had decided everything. Denis Urubko's words from that morning are spare and raw. In the hours after Bolotov's death, he wrote, "I don't know how to write this. The rope broke after fraying against sharp rock. Death was instantaneous. The shock was immediate, but the guilt lingered, an emptiness that no skill or preparation could fill. For Urubko, the loss was not just of a partner, but of a friend whose judgment he trusted with his life. The calculation of risk on Everest had always been part of their bond, but nothing prepared him for the silence that followed the snap of that rope. He replayed the scene in his mind, the decision to avoid the crowded fixed lines, the choice of anchor, the feel of the rope under gloved hands. Each detail, so routine in the lowlands, became a source of doubt at 5,500 meters. In interviews, Urubko spoke of the responsibility he felt, how a few centimeters of nylon, pressed unseen against granite, could erase decades of experience in a second. That sense of helplessness, the knowledge that no warning came before the end, drove him to speak out about rope protection and edge safety. Out of grief, a warning took shape. Urubko's advocacy for edge padding and rope management was not theoretical. It was a response to a loss measured in seconds and centimeters, a reminder that on Everest, even the strongest partnership can be undone by the smallest oversight. A static rope, trusted for its strength and minimal stretch, can become a silent hazard when it's pressed against a sharp edge at altitude. In the cold of Everest, temperatures dropping to -15 degrees Celsius, the nylon fibers lose up to 20% of their rated strength. The physics are unforgiving. When a climber's full weight loads a rope over a granite lip, the force at the contact point can spike above 10 kilonewtons, far beyond what the sheath is designed to withstand. Static ropes, with less than 10% stretch, absorb almost none of the energy from a sudden slip or shift. Instead, the force concentrates at the edge, slicing fibers in seconds. Laboratory tests show that even a 9.5 millimeter rope, rated for over 20 kilonewtons in perfect conditions, can fail in under 5 seconds when loaded over a sharp radius at these temperatures. The cut is rarely clean, usually a frayed, mushroomed end, evidence of heat and pressure working together. After Bolotov's death, technical manuals and training courses began to stress edge protection, not as an optional precaution, but as a basic requirement in alpine terrain. Manufacturers increased abrasion resistance in rope sheaths, and the UIA revised its recommendations, urging climbers to use padding or reroute lines away from sharp contacts whenever possible. The lesson was clear. On Everest, the system's weakest point is often invisible until it fails. Safety is not just a matter of clipping in, but of understanding how each force, each degree of cold, and every centimeter of rope can decide a life. Tomas Olsson was 30 years old when he set his sights on Everest's north face. His ambition was as bold as it was simple, to become the first person to ski from the summit, tracing a line down the steepest, most forbidding aspect of the mountain. On May 16, 2006, at 8,500 meters, just below the summit ridge, Olsson and his partner, Tormod Gronheim, faced a barrier no ski could cross, a sheer 150-foot cliff of rock and ice. The only way down was to rappel. Olsson had staked his career on risk, but this was a new threshold. The north face, hammered by jet stream winds and scoured to bare blue ice, offered no easy anchors. The pair improvised, driving snow stakes into the hard-packed crust and backing them up with an ice axe, hoping the frozen surface would hold. At this altitude, oxygen is a third of what it is at sea level. Hands shake, vision narrows, and judgment blurs. Every decision is slowed by exhaustion and cold. Olsson's dream was not just a personal challenge, it was a statement about what was possible on the world's highest mountain. But the margin for error was vanishingly thin. Above 8,000 meters, even the best prepared climbers are forced to gamble with every move. For Olsson, the next few minutes would test not just his skill, but the reliability of every piece of gear in his system. The line between adventure and catastrophe was measured in the strength of a few metal stakes buried in brittle snow. Tomas Olsson clipped into the anchor, trusting his life to 3 points of contact, 2 snow stakes hammered into wind-scoured crust, and the blade of an ice axe wedged deep in brittle ice. At 8,500 meters, just below Everest's summit ridge, the air was razor thin, and every breath came with effort. Tormod Gronheim had already descended, his rappel line taut, boots scraping the face. Olsson followed, lowering himself over the edge, skis strapped to his pack, a silhouette against the void. The anchor, solid in theory, was at the mercy of altitude and cold. The snow, hard as concrete on the surface, concealed pockets of weakness underneath. Temperatures hovered near -30 degrees Celsius. The stakes, designed for the Alps or the Rockies, were never meant for this kind of punishment. As Olsson's weight loaded the system, the snowpack around the stakes shifted, then crumbled. There was no warning. The anchor ripped free, metal and nylon snapping upward as the force released. Olsson dropped the full height of the cliff, 45 meters, before accelerating into the couloir below. The slope offered no resistance. He tumbled for nearly 1,800 meters, vanishing into the emptiness above the North Face's broken glacier. His body was later found at 6,700 meters, far from the point of failure, a stark reminder that on Everest, the margin for error is erased by altitude and cold. The dream of a complete ski descent ended in silence, and the lesson, never trust a single anchor above the death zone, echoed down the mountain. Tormod Granheim stood alone on Everest's north face, stripped of the euphoria that had driven him and Tomas Olsson toward their summit dream. The silence after Olsson's fall was absolute, broken only by the hiss of wind scouring the ice. In the hours that followed, Granheim's thoughts circled the anchor they had built, 2 snow stakes and an ice axe, arranged as they had practiced countless times on lesser peaks. At 8,500 meters, with oxygen scarce and exhaustion blurring every movement, the system had seemed reliable. But the mountain had exposed a truth no manual could soften. Above the death zone, even a textbook anchor can be an illusion. Granheim later described the failure in words that carried the weight of survivors' guilt. "One minute it was solid," he said. "The next, everything let go. High altitude turns good snow into a powder trap." He replayed the sequence again and again, his own descent, the anchor holding, Olsson following, then the entire system tearing free in a single, unanswerable moment. The responsibility was as inescapable as the thin air. He had trusted the anchor, trusted the method, but Everest demanded more than trust. In the years after, Granheim became a quiet advocate for redundancy in high-altitude anchors. He spoke to climbing groups and wrote in expedition journals, urging others never to trust a single point above 8,000 meters, no matter how solid it seems. His message was clear. The margin for error is erased by altitude and cold. Redundancy is not an extra step. It is the only defense against forces that can turn certainty into catastrophe. Granheim's loss became a warning, etched into the memory of every climber who reads his account. The lesson endures. On Everest, safety is never a given, and every decision is paid for in consequences that reach far beyond the summit. At 8,500 meters, the rules of snow and ice are rewritten by altitude. Anchors that seem reliable at base camp can lose half their strength in the death zone. Laboratory tests and cold chambers reveal that wind-scoured snow, so common on Everest's upper slopes, offers less than 1 kilonewton of shear resistance at minus 30 degrees Celsius. Metal contracts, snow bonds become brittle, and the margin for error shrinks to fractions. Even a well-placed snow stake or ice axe, driven deep and equalized, can be undermined by invisible layers, crust on the powder below, leaving the system vulnerable to sudden collapse. The physics are simple but merciless. As a climber loads the anchor, the force is multiplied by body weight, movement, and the angle of the slope. A dynamic load, even from a controlled rappel, can exceed what the snowpack can absorb. The result is total failure, stakes ripped free, ice axes yanked out, the entire anchor system exploding in a single, silent instant. After Olsson's fall, technical committees and alpine training centers began to codify what had been a matter of experience. Redundancy is not optional above 8,000 meters. The IATC's 2008 guidelines made it explicit. Every anchor must have at least 2 independent points, each capable of holding a full load. Cold chamber data now appears in every advanced course, showing how snow cohesion drops as temperatures fall. The lesson is clear. On Everest, the only defense against the mountain's hidden weaknesses is a system built to survive the loss of any single part. On May 15, 1982, at nearly 8,000 meters on Everest's north face, Marty Hoey moved with the calm focus that had defined her career. 31 years old, she was already known for her skill on Denali, the Alps, and Himalayan peaks, respected for her steadiness in places where mistakes are rarely forgiven. That spring, she served as both guide and climber, helping manage the fixed ropes that snaked up the steepest sections above Camp 6. The fixed line system was their lifeline, webbing, carabiners, and harnesses checked and rechecked, every connection a matter of survival in the thin air. Hoey's job meant threading harnesses, clipping in, and watching for slack as climbers moved up and down the face. The routine was familiar, but above 8,000 meters, even the smallest task demanded full concentration. Oxygen was scarce, exhaustion constant, and the cold bit through every layer. The harness system relied on a webbing belt and a metal buckle, secured by doubling the tail back through a retaining loop, a method standard for the era, but unforgiving of error. That morning, as wind swept the face and crampons scraped ice, Hoey's trust in her experience and equipment was absolute. Yet at this altitude, the margin for error had vanished, and a single misthreaded buckle would soon decide everything. A gust of wind swept the ridge as Marty Hoey reached for the fixed line, her gloved hands steady despite the thin air. At nearly 8,000 meters, every action unfolded in slow motion. She checked her harness, clipped in, and began to move upward, trusting the system she had relied on through years of high-altitude climbs. The harness, webbing cinched with a metal buckle, was a standard design in 1982, demanding that the tail be doubled back through a retaining loop. In the death zone, where oxygen is a third of sea level, even simple tasks become complex. Hypoxia clouds judgment, fingers lose dexterity, and the cold seeps into every joint. The slope steepened beneath her crampons. One step caught on an ice bulge, causing a minor slip. The fixed rope held, but the sudden load, over 6 kilonewtons, enough to stress any connection, shifted all the force onto her harness buckle. In that instant, the improperly threaded buckle slipped free. The webbing unraveled. There was no second chance. Hoey was no longer attached to the mountain. She fell more than 12 meters before vanishing from sight, the line above still taut, the system below untouched. The rope had done its job, the harness had not. The shock rippled through her team, who found only the severed harness and the silent reminder that above 8,000 meters, a missed check can erase a lifetime of experience. The accident forced climbers everywhere to confront a hard truth. Being clipped in is not the same as being safe. Harness design changed in the years that followed. Auto-locking buckles became standard, and buddy checks became routine. But for Marty Hoey, the cost of that lesson was absolute. Shock and disbelief rippled through Marty Hoey's team as the reality set in. For hours, her friends and fellow climbers searched for answers on a slope scoured by wind and silence. The harness, its buckle still open, lay where she had fallen. Above them, the fixed rope remained taut, untouched, a bitter reminder that the system had worked as designed. It was the smallest detail, a webbing tail not doubled back, that had undone everything. In the aftermath, teammates spoke quietly of the routines they had always trusted. One recalled, "We checked each other's knots at base camp, but up there, everyone was too tired, too cold. We just assumed." The loss was not just personal. The expedition's leaders gathered the team and, with voices strained by grief and altitude, insisted that from that day forward, no one would clip in without a second set of eyes checking every buckle and knot. The practice spread quickly, first among American teams, then across the Himalayas. It became known as the buddy check, a ritual of mutual inspection, repeated until it was second nature. In the years that followed, auto-locking harness buckles became standard, but the habit of stopping to check, a moment of shared vigilance, remained Hoey's legacy. Her death turned a simple oversight into a lesson written into every mountaineering manual. Trust is not enough. Every climber's safety depends on the smallest, most easily missed connection. A harness buckle may seem like a simple piece of gear, but above 8,000 meters, its design becomes a matter of life and death. The classic buckle system used in 1982 required the webbing tail to be doubled back through a metal loop. This step, easy to overlook with numb fingers and clouded judgment, was the only thing preventing the webbing from slipping under sudden load. Laboratory tests show that a properly doubled back buckle can withstand forces well above 10 kilonewtons. But if left unsecured, the friction drops by more than half. At Everest altitudes, with oxygen at just 33% of sea level, hypoxia slows mental processing and blunts attention to detail. Tasks that feel automatic at base camp become complex puzzles in the death zone. The accident that claimed Marty Hoey's life exposed a flaw not in the metal, but in the human-machine interface. The buckle had not failed. Instead, the system depended on a step that could be skipped without warning. After her death, engineers and expedition leaders pressed for a design that would lock automatically, removing the need for a manual double back. By 1985, most major manufacturers had introduced auto-locking buckles, mechanisms that cinch tight under load and cannot slip, regardless of threading. UIA adopted new standards, making the auto-locking feature a requirement for all certified harnesses. Diagrams circulated in training courses, showing how a buckle's teeth grip the webbing when doubled back, and how a single missed loop can turn a harness into a trap door. The physics are unforgiving. A sudden fall directs the full force onto the weakest link. At altitude, that link is often the climber's ability to check and recheck their own system. The lesson written into every manual is clear: technology can close gaps, but vigilance remains the last defense. Night fell on the upper slopes of Everest, turning the South Col route into a corridor of shadows and biting wind. On the evening of May 25, 1996, Bruce Herrod, a photojournalist and climber, began his descent from the summit alone. The altimeter read 8,790 meters, just below the Hillary Step, where the fixed ropes traced a narrow path over exposed rock and snow. Darkness pressed in from every side. The temperature dropped below -20 degrees Celsius, and the oxygen-starved air made each step a struggle. Every movement cost energy he no longer had to spare. The fixed ropes, anchored by previous teams, offered a single line of retreat. Herrod clipped his harness to the nylon cord, trusting it to keep him from slipping into the void. At this altitude, the rope was more than equipment. It was the last safeguard against a fatal mistake. But on Everest, being attached to the line is not the same as being safe. The system was designed to prevent a fall, not to rescue a climber overcome by exhaustion or cold. Alone in the dark, Herrod's world narrowed to the short stretch of rope in front of him, the hiss of wind, and the slow, mechanical process of unclipping and reclipping as he edged down the mountain. Vulnerability was total. Every minute spent above the Hillary Step drained his strength further, and the margin for survival shrank with the night. Bruce Herrod's harness remained clipped to the fixed rope at the base of the Hillary Step, just below 8,790 meters. The line held steady, its knots and carabiners intact, but Herrod himself was motionless. In the death zone, exhaustion and hypoxia can rob a climber of the ability to move, even as the safety system keeps them from falling. The paradox was stark. The rope prevented a plunge into the void, yet offered no rescue from the slow collapse brought on by cold and oxygen starvation. Herrod's descent had slowed to a crawl through the night of May 25, 1996. Alone, his body burned through its remaining energy, every step more costly than the last. The fixed lines, installed to catch slips on the exposed rock, now became a tether, holding him in place as his strength faded. By the time other climbers passed the next morning, Herrod was dead, still attached, head bowed, harness locked to the line. His body was found on May 27, 1996, a silent warning that on Everest, being secured to the mountain is not the same as being safe. The rope did not fail, but survival depended on reserves the mountain had already stripped away. Shock lingers in the words of those who witnessed Bruce Herrod's final hours. In interviews recorded after the 1996 season, climbers speak of the moment they realized Herrod's body was still clipped to the fixed rope below the Hillary Step. One recalled, "We came around the corner, and there he was, head down, harness locked to the line. It looked like he was resting, but he wasn't moving." The image haunted teammates and rescuers alike. A climber suspended between life and death. The rope that should have saved him, now a silent tether holding him in the death zone. Another climber described the eerie calm. You expect to see bodies off the route, but he was right there, clipped in where everyone passes. It made you question everything you trusted about the system. The psychological shock ran deeper than fear of falling. It was the realization that the rope, so often seen as a guarantee, could become a trap, holding a climber in place as exhaustion and cold took over. For those who survived, the memory of Herrod's clipped corpse became a warning. On Everest, safety is never absolute, and the line between protection and peril can vanish without a sound. Above 8,000 meters, the human body begins to unravel. Oxygen saturation drops below 55%, shrinking the window for clear thought and movement. This is the death zone, a place where even the best designed safety systems can become traps. Fixed ropes, so essential for preventing fatal slips on exposed ground, offer no defense against the slow collapse brought on by exhaustion and hypoxia. In '98, after a series of tragedies, expedition leaders formalized a new rule. Every climber must perform a buddy check before unclipping or moving on the fixed lines. The logic was simple. At this altitude, judgment is so impaired that even an experienced climber can forget a carabiner, miss a harness buckle, or fail to notice a partner's fading strength. Oxygen deprivation does more than cloud the mind. It distorts time, slows reflexes, and turns routine descents into ordeals. Spacing on the lines becomes critical. If one climber stalls, those above are forced to wait, burning through their last reserves. A graph of arterial oxygen saturation at 8,800 meters shows a steep plunge below 60%. Loss of motor control is nearly inevitable. The fixed rope will hold a body in place, but it cannot revive a climber who is no longer able to move. The system is designed to prevent a fall, not to rescue someone from the consequences of altitude. The lesson, written in the margins of every expedition report since 1998, is stark. A rope can keep you from falling, but in the death zone, survival depends on the ability to keep moving. The fixed line is not a lifeline, it is a boundary. And beyond it, there is no margin for error. On June 8, 1924, two men set out from their high camp on Everest's North Ridge, carrying the hopes of a nation and the weight of the unknown. George Mallory, age 37, and Andrew Sandy Irvine, just 22, climbed into the thin air above 8,600 meters. Their goal was simple in statement, almost impossible in execution: to reach the summit by a route no one had completed, using equipment that would be unrecognizable to modern climbers. Their packs held oxygen bottles of brass and steel. Around their waists, a single length of manila hemp rope bound them together, 3/4 of an inch thick, twisted from plant fiber, with no dynamic stretch and no modern protection devices. There were no harnesses, no carabiners, no pitons hammered into the rock, just the rope, their axes, and their skill. Every step higher brought them deeper into the death zone, where oxygen is 1/4 of what it is at sea level. The route was a series of broken ledges and steep rock bands, the final approach to the summit pyramid. By early afternoon, clouds swallowed the ridge. Mallory and Irvine vanished into the mist, last glimpsed near the base of the second step. They never returned. Decades later, when Mallory's body was found at 8,155 meters, a frayed length of rope still circled his waist, snapped and worn. The mountain kept its secrets, but the evidence left behind, broken rope, battered gear, spoke of a system pushed past its limits, and a fate sealed by the simplest link in the chain. The last hours of George Mallory's climb are written in fragments: an empty oxygen bottle, a single ice axe left below the second step, and a length of manila rope, snapped and frayed, still cinched around his waist. The facts are sparse but unyielding. Somewhere above 8,600 meters on June 8, 1924, as clouds swallowed the ridge, something catastrophic happened. Forensic analysis of Mallory's remains, discovered in 1999 at 8,155 meters, revealed a deep rope abrasion around his waist and a broken end of hemp, fibers splayed and worn. The rope had not come untied. It had parted under stress, likely in a single violent moment. The drop was immense, a vertical descent of nearly 300 meters over shattered limestone and snow, ending far below the last sighting. The body's position and injuries spoke of a rapid, uncontrolled fall. No trace of Sandy Irvine was ever found. The rope, twisted from plant fiber and never designed to absorb the energy of a dynamic fall, had reached its limit. There is no record of a shout, no eyewitness, only the evidence left behind: a snapped lifeline, a battered body, and a question that endures. On Everest, The simplest link, the rope meant to bind partners together, can be the first to fail. The mountain gave back a story told in broken strands, and the silence of what was lost hangs over every climber who trusts a rope above the clouds. Ruth Mallory's letters, written in the months after her husband vanished on Everest, speak quietly of hope and loss. She had watched George devote himself to the mountain, knowing that every attempt carried a risk no family could truly prepare for. In one letter, she wrote, "I want more of it for you, but it's a terrible price." The words, simple and unadorned, capture the weight that Everest places not just on climbers, but on those waiting at home. For Ruth, the news arrived as a telegram. No details, only the confirmation that George would not return. The rope that was meant to protect him had failed high above the clouds, leaving only questions and an empty space at the family table. In the years that followed, her grief became part of the mountain's story, a reminder that every technical decision, every knot and anchor, carries consequences that reach far beyond the summit. The cost of a snapped rope is measured not just in meters fallen, but in the lives forever changed by its failure. Ruth's letters endure as testimony to the terrible price of trust misplaced and the silent burden borne by those left behind. A length of rope is more than a tool. It is a contract between climber and mountain, its reliability determined by the science woven into every strand. In 1924, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine relied on Manila hemp, a plant fiber rope with almost no stretch and little tolerance for shock. When loaded suddenly by a slip, a fall, or even a partner's weight shifting on a ledge, hemp transmits the full force in an instant. In the cold above 8,000 meters, these ropes lost up to 30% of their strength, their fibers growing brittle and prone to snapping. The evidence lies in the frayed, broken ends recovered with Mallory's body. A rupture, not a clean cut, showing the rope had simply reached its limit. The arrival of nylon in 1933 marked a leap forward. Nylon ropes, braided for both strength and elasticity, could stretch by 30 to 40% under load, enough to absorb the shock of a fall, dispersing energy that would have shattered hemp. Yet even nylon is not invincible. At minus 10 degrees Celsius, modern ropes lose as much as a third of their rated strength. Static models, favored for rappels and fixed lines, offer minimal stretch and are more vulnerable to edge cuts, especially when pressed against sharp granite. Tensile tests in cold chambers reveal the limits. A static rope rated for 20 kilonewtons at room temperature may fail at 16 in the Khumbu cold. The difference is measured in seconds and centimeters, but on Everest, that margin is everything. The lesson, written in broken fibers from 1924 to today, is clear. Technology advances, but the mountain's demands remain absolute. On Everest, every rope, nylon or hemp, anchored or improvised, still faces the same unyielding laws of gravity and stone. Today, climbers trust systems refined by tragedy, yet no certification or checklist can change the mountain's indifference. The summit remains a test of both human precision and humility. Each clipped carabatine is a silent wager, and each step above 8,000 meters reminds us, safety here is always provisional. Stay vigilant. And if you climb, know what you're trusting your life to.